Welcome to episode 92 of Morning Kickoff. We are almost reaching our 100 episode mark. Pretty excited. I've been doing this for some time now, and now we have a very special episode as we haven't had a podcast episode in quite some time because it's been pretty quiet around the NFL. Today we have a very fun one, a NFL mock draft 2021 Morning Kickoff edition. The last time I did one of these last year in 2020, still the most viewed video on my channel, and by far. I mean, usually I talk about the Minnesota Vikings, so obviously the draft is very hyped up and it's appealed by all 32 teams, while Minnesota Vikings were more of a close 1/32nd, I guess, of the entire NFL. So let's get right into it with our first board. Here we are. These are the first 6 picks that we have. Obviously, first overall is going to be Trevor Lawrence, quarterback of Clemson. We'll go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, as it's pretty clear that that's what's going to happen here. And then next up, we have Zach Wilson going to the Jets. This is just as much of a lock as the first overall pick. Both the Jaguars and the Jets desperately need a quarterback right now, and it's clear Trevor Lawrence is going to go 1, Zach Wilson is going to go 2. And weeks ago, people were saying Justin Fields is obviously going to be the second overall pick. And while he did have the tape, his draft stock just continues to fall. And not only is his draft stock falling, but Zach Wilson is continuing to grow over both of the pro days, over the combine. Zach Wilson is going to be the second overall pick. No question about that. And then next up, we have the San Francisco 49ers, who go with Justin Fields. Now, it's clear the 49ers are going to go quarterback here, and this is where it can be a little bit of a debate if you're going to go Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Mac Jones. I don't know why anyone is arguing Mac Jones, but it's between Justin Fields and Trey Lance here. It is clear the 49ers are going to go quarterback, and this is why they traded to this spot. This would actually initially be the not the Dolphins. This would initially be the Houston's pick, the Texans, but obviously Texans traded to the Dolphins. Dolphins traded to the 49ers. Dolphins just acquired a bunch of picks in the process. And now the first 3 players drafted off of the board are all going to be quarterbacks. And it's no question that the first 3 are going to be quarterback. It's just who is going to be the third quarterback off the board. And then next up, we have the Atlanta Falcons on the clock. Now, the Atlanta Falcons have this pick and can really do whatever they want with this 4th overall pick. They can take the best non-quarterback off the board. They can take a quarterback here. Now, I could see why the Falcons would go Trey Lance or not Mac Jones. I could see why they would go Trey Lance here, but in all honesty, the best move the Falcons can do is trade down, and I think a lot of teams are going to trade up for that quarterback at the 4th overall pick, as the best 3 quarterbacks just got off the board, and then you have Trey Lance, and there's a steep decline going from there. So I think a lot of teams are going to trade up to this 4th overall pick, or a lot of teams are going to offer trades to get this 4th overall pick, where the Atlanta Falcons will trade it to the Denver Broncos, who will trade up and grab Trey Lance, quarterback of NDSU. Now, yes, the Broncos do have Drew Lock, and Drew Lock is not a bad quarterback. The thing about Drew Lock is he's obviously injury prone, and that's the biggest reason why the Broncos have been looking for a quarterback. The thing about Drew Lock is he's in a division with Patrick Mahomes and now Justin Herbert. Drew Lock is not going to cut it. He's not going to bring the Denver Broncos to the next level, and this is a perfect spot for Trey Lance to go. He is going to an elite receiving core right there, a very young receiving core, all on the rookie contracts. You have Jerry Judy, who I argue is actually the best wide receiver out of the 2020 draft class. We just haven't seen it yet. And I'm a Vikings fan, and we have Justin Jefferson, but I really do think Jerry Judy's the best wide receiver out of the 2020 draft class. On top of that, they have Noah Fant. They have KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton. There is so many players for Trey Lance to work with, and this is where he should want to go, and the Broncos should look to him, because Trey Lance, you can't say he's going to be a day 1 starter, an upgrade from Drew Lock, but the thing is, it's worth a shot, and it would be worth a trade. What will the Bengals give up? Broncos give up. The Broncos will give up the 9th overall pick, their 3rd rounder, 7th rounder, and a 2022 2nd rounder to grab Trey Lance. And this is a very good pick, in my opinion. Next up, you have the Bengals on the clock. Now, the thing about the Bengals that differentiates them from the rest of these teams, they don't need a quarterback. They took a quarterback first overall, Joe Burrow, last year. So they have an option to go with the first non-quarterback off the board. Nobody's going to be trading up for Mac Jones here. It just wouldn't make sense. And Bengals, even if Bengals got offered trades, they need to help out Joe Burrow. And we saw that last year, that offensive line needs help, and the receiving core and running back everywhere on the offense needs help for Joe Burrow. And this is where they go with who I think is the best non-quarterback, and that is Kyle Pitts. Now, yes, they can go Penei Sewell here. They can also get an offensive lineman in the 2nd round. They can go Jamar Chase here. They can get a wide receiver in the 2nd round as well. You cannot find a player like Kyle Pitts anywhere. And yes, he's a tight end. You know why this is very important? He's a tight end, but he will be Joe Burrow's #1 target. He will be used the most. T. Higgins will have to be their starting wide receiver coming up this next season. They lost AJ Green. T. Higgins will have to be their starting wide receiver, and hopefully he can step up into that starting role. Think about Kyle Pitts. He's going to be their #1 target. He's going to bring a lot to the table, and I think he is the best receiver in this class. Now, I can't say he's the best receiver. He's the best all-around offensive player in this class and the best non-quarterback in this class. And for that reason, you go for value, and Kyle Pitts will bring a lot to the table. And then next up, the Miami Dolphins are on the clock with the 6th overall pick. The Miami Dolphins and Bengals both took quarterbacks in the top 10 of last year's draft and are going to add value to their offense, giving Tua some help here. And this is where they go with a wide receiver, Ja'Marr Chase. Now, Ja'Marr Chase, I really think he's going to go to the Dolphins. If he doesn't go to the Bengals, he's going to go to the Dolphins because both of these teams need to give their quarterback some help. You need to build around that quarterback. The Dolphins do have Devontae Parker, and they did sign Will Fuller. Will Fuller is suspended the first 6 games, so Ja'Marr Chase will be a day 1 starter going into this team. Even with that, you need depth at the receiving core. They also have this Gesicki guy, so honestly, if Kyle Pitts doesn't go #5 and Ja'Marr Chase does, Kyle Pitts will go to the Dolphins because this is how much these offensive weapons help the teams. And I do think Ja'Marr Chase will be a great fit. He will be a great fit with the Dolphins as they do need help receiver. You know who else needs help at receiver? The Detroit Lions. And this is where the Detroit Lions go with Devontae Smith, wide receiver of Alabama. Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner, will go to the Detroit Lions, and he will be their only wide receiver. I have never seen a team take this much of a hit in free agency at the wide receiver position. The Dolphins lost Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and Danny Amendola all during this year of free agency. That is their starting 4 wide receivers. This is a perfect spot for them to go with a top 3 wide receiver. My top 3 wide receiver, I'm talking about obviously Ja'Marr Chase, Devontae Smith, or Jalen Waddle. They're going to take whatever one is available here at 7. No need to trade down. No need to trade up. Dolphins just have to go receiver here. Give Jared Goff some help because I feel really bad for Jared Goff going to that offense of all offenses in the NFL, and then everyone else leaves. The only player they have right now is TJ Hawkinson. Now, DeAndre Swift, yes, he can work. We just haven't seen a lot from his rookie season, but TJ Hawkinson is an elite tight end, and that's a player a lot of people do forget about. And now the Carolina Panthers are on the clock, and it's a no-brainer. If Penei Sewell's here, Carolina Panthers are going to go with Penei Sewell. He should be a top 5 overall pick. Thing is, he's not going to be a top 5 overall pick, in my opinion. Now, he could go to the Bengals, but I don't think he will be a top 5 overall pick because you have 4 quarterbacks that are going to be going somewhere in the top 10, no question. And I think that those are going to be the first 4 players off the board will all be quarterbacks. Outside of that, this is a very deep offensive tackle class where teams can go with offensive tackles in the 2nd round. Now, yes, you can't find a player like Penei Sewell in the 2nd round, but it's a very deep offensive tackle class, and this is where I do think Penei Sewell will fall to the 8th overall pick. Someone can also trade up for him. I just don't see any of these teams that we just talked about trading down. Next up, you have the Atlanta Falcons who are on the clock with the 9th overall pick. This is from the Denver Broncos in this trade. And Falcons, they can go with a few options here. Thing is, they're in a division with the Buccaneers who just won a Super Bowl and brought all of their guys back. Their division is not open. Now, yes, they can make a run with the playoffs. I do think the Atlanta Falcons are a very underrated team, and given a 5th overall pick, like they had a terrible record, but they were a pretty good team last year, and you saw this all around the board. They just ended up losing a bunch of games because of all their, they're the best at losing games. Anyways, you have the Falcons who are on the clock here, and I think it's time for them to look for a rebuild. Now, yes, they have a lot of offensive weapons, so they don't really need a wide receiver here. Offensive line, I guess they could go with Rashawn Slater here, but I really do think this is time for them to rebuild, and they go with Mac Jones, quarterback out of Alabama. This is the perfect spot for Mac Jones to go. They don't have a backup quarterback. Now, obviously, you're not drafting Mac Jones to be a backup quarterback. You're going to draft him to hope to move him into the starting role going into the future, but Matt Ryan is good. Matt Ryan is not going anywhere. Matt Ryan will be with this team for at least 1 more season, most likely 2 more seasons. He is a potential out in the 2022 offseason. So if this season does not go well with the Atlanta Falcons once again and Matt Ryan does have another bad season, you can get rid of him, cut him, move into Mac Jones. It's time for the Atlanta Falcons to go rebuild. The New Orleans Saints right now just lost Drew Brees. They're not going to be making a run for the playoffs. Actually, as long as Sean Payton is their head coach, they're going to have a good offense, and their defense is very good. So they're probably going to get 2nd this upcoming season as well. And then you have Buccaneers, who just brought all of their players back, and they are loaded front, back, and center. So Atlanta Falcons really just don't have a chance, and it's time for them to try just take a shot at rebuilding. And I do think them grabbing Mac Jones, them trading down to grab a quarterback is the best option for them. And they just got a load of draft picks, so they can load up on offensive line somewhere else in the draft because they got a lot from Denver Broncos in this mock draft. At the 10th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys are on the clock, and Cowboys, just go with Patrick Surtain. It's a must. Like, he is going to be available at the 10th overall pick. He will, and he is the most NFL-ready corner in this class. You have to go with him. That was the worst defense that I've seen from the Dallas Cowboys, and very disappointing because I said before the season started, I said watch out for the Cowboys defense because they do have a lot of pieces. Well, how was I wrong? Because that defense was horrendous. Going with Patrick Surtain, who will be a day one starting corner, and then you'll use Trevon Diggs as well as your cornerback duo. You need to go with this. He is the most NFL-ready corner, and you can't go Caleb Farley here because he has injuries, so I wouldn't go with him. You have to go with Patrick Surtain. He is the best non-offensive player that you can grab here, the most NFL-ready non-offensive player that you can grab here, and it's a very good draft pick, and I would like to see that happen. At the 11th overall pick, New York Giants go with Rashawn Slater, offensive tackle of Northwestern. Yes, they went Andrew Thomas last year and Daniel Jones before that, so they don't need a new starting left tackle. Thing about Rashawn Slater, he can play anywhere you want on the offensive line. And people will argue Giants, because they had a terrible receiving core last year, they added a lot of pieces to where they don't need to draft a receiver here. They added Kenny Golladay, Kyle Rudolph, and John Ross. They're giving Daniel Jones a lot of help. He just needs more help on the offensive line. And 11th overall is a perfect spot to grab Rashawn Slater. If he's available, obviously. A lot of people have him going sooner, but like I said, this is a very deep offensive tackle class. You can use Rashawn Slater somewhere on your starting offensive line. Obviously, Andrew Thomas does have injury concerns. He will be a starting left tackle going into this upcoming season. If Rashawn Slater does go to the New York Giants, I would expect him to either start at left guard or right tackle. Anywhere on the offensive line, he will add a lot of value because in college, he played wherever you needed him to play. Play him at center, why not? And now the Eagles are sitting at 12. Eagles are sitting at 12 ready, hoping that someone is available there. So by someone, I mean a wide receiver, either Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, or Jalen Waddle, who is available here. Another Alabama wide receiver taking in the top 15. Jalen Waddle, he is the best after the catch and will add a lot of value. Jalen Waddle, having Jalen Hurts throwing to him, and then having Jalen Reagor, that's three Jalens. Having Jalen Hurts throw to Jalen Waddle and Jalen Reagor, that's a very good wide receiver duo right there. Now, Jalen Reagor was injured a majority of last season, so you didn't get to see a whole lot from him. But Jalen Waddle will add a lot to this team. And Hurts, he doesn't throw a beautiful deep ball. He doesn't throw the best deep ball in the world. He can make plays with his arms and his legs, yes, from what we've seen. Him throwing to Jalen Waddle, he can just make plays after the catch. And this is what he was known for in college, and this is a perfect spot for him to go. And I don't like the Eagles. I'm not a big Eagles guy, but for Jalen Waddle's sake, I do hope he goes here because this is an offense that would utilize him a lot. And then if we take a look at our next 6 picks, we have the Chargers who are on the clock. Now, Chargers, they have a lot of options here. They can go with a lot of people. Obviously, they grabbed Justin Herbert last year, where typically you want to draft players and build around your quarterback when you take your franchise quarterback like Justin Herbert is. Thing with Herbert is he already went to a already developed offense, a very good offensive line. Well, very good when they added a lot of pieces in free agency, and the receiving core was good as well. So I do think they go defense here, and they go with Micah Parsons, linebacker of Penn State. Thing about Micah is he's very prone to falling by in this draft. I think it's possible he might go in the 20s. Thing is, he's a linebacker. So do you take him this soon? Because Chargers can maybe find him somewhere late round if they trade up, but he will complement Kenneth Murray's, who was drafted last year in the first round, where the Chargers did trade up and grab Kenneth Murray. I think they traded up with the Patriots, if I remember that right. He will complement his style, as Kenneth Murray is an inside linebacker. Micah Parsons is an outside linebacker and a pass rusher. Arguably the best pass rusher in this draft class, and will add a lot to that team. He will help Joey Bosa from the edge because Bosa was a one-man team last year, and they can definitely use some more pass rushers in Los Angeles. Next up, my Minnesota Vikings are on the clock with the 14th overall pick, and they immediately turn in their card and go with Kwity Paye, defensive end from Michigan. This is the player that the Rick Spielman is hoping to get here. Now, he hasn't verbally said it, obviously, because for obvious reasons, but there's no way he's going to trade up. This is a player who he's looking for. Kwity Paye will be a starting right defensive end over Stephen Weatherly, and having him with Danielle Hunter would be, I would love to see that happen. So If he is available here, I do think that will be an easy lock. Otherwise, I do think Vikings will go corner because of what happened with Jeff Gladney. Next up, the Patriots are on the clock with the 15th overall pick, and they go with corner. This is the player who I think the Vikings would go with if they can't get Kwity Paye, and that is J.C. Horn, cornerback out of South Carolina. Now, people argue that he is the best corner in this draft class, and people also argue that Caleb Farley is the best corner in this draft class. I think you just have to go with the safest pick, what you know is going to work, and Bill Belichick, he will go with a safe pick, and that is in J.C. Horn, who will be not a starting corner right out of college, but he will start as a slot, a nickel. He'll play some roles on the outside as well. So he'll be utilized a lot with Carolina is what I'm trying to say here. So 16th overall, Cardinals are on the clock. Now, Cardinals need to go defense here or offensive line. They can go offensive line, but they can also fill that role anywhere else in the draft. Actually, no. Cardinals only have 5 draft picks in this draft class, so they could go offensive tackle here and play him maybe left guard, right tackle, somewhere on the offensive line. But I do have the Cardinals going with Caleb Farley, corner from Virginia Tech. A lot of people, like I said, argue that he is the best corner when healthy. Thing is, I don't see him being taken. There's a possibility someone does take a shot on him, maybe somewhere in the top 15, but he's also prone to falling. So I do think Cardinals will take one of the top 3 corners with the 16th overall pick, and in this case, that is Caleb Farley. Next up, at the 17th overall pick, we have John Gruden with the Las Vegas Raiders, who are on the clock. Gruden was unhappy with his offensive line and this defensive line last year. Defensive line was looking okay, so the entire defense as a whole he was unhappy with. So John Gruden, I do think here goes with the safest draft pick possible, and that is taking Christian Barmore, defensive tackle of Alabama. Now, yes, their biggest need is at the offensive line, and they can go offensive line here, and I would see that possibly happening. Thing is, Christian Barmore is a player you just don't want to miss on, and Christian Barmore is a player who you know is going to be a lock in the NFL, and he will add a lot of value to that defensive line. They will have one of the best defensive fronts in the NFL. With Clayton Farrell, they added Unique Ngakoue, they added Solomon Thomas, and then adding Christian Barmore too. That would just be such a good defensive line right there. And yes, I think the best thing for them would go offensive line here because, like we saw, Derek Carr does need more offensive line help. So I do think that's the best thing for them to go. I just feel like John Gruden's going to go with the safest pick here, and that would be drafting Christian Barmore. And now the Miami Dolphins are on the clock with the 18th overall pick, and I think they're going to get some trade offers here. I don't have them trading down, but I think they will get some trade offers, and they're not going to take it, and they're going to stick with their pick and go with Jason Away, defensive end from Penn State. Not much to talk about here. I mean, Miami Dolphins just need defensive players. They need players all around the board. They're going to have a very good defense. I'm saying that like they don't already have a good defense. They have a good defense, but Jason Away will just make their defensive line that better. Just like the Las Vegas Raiders, who already have a solid defensive line, it will just improve, and they can build a great defensive front. And they would have a defensive front with Wilkins, Away, and Raekwon Davis. So a very good defensive front for the Miami Dolphins right there, and I think that's a lock if he is still available at that spot, which he's not expected to be, but if he is, I think they will go with that. And then now the Washington football team are on the clock, and they need a left tackle. They need someone who can block for Ryan Fitzmagic. I was about to say Tannehill. Ryan Fitzpatrick. They need someone who can block for him, and they have a perfect opportunity to draft Christian Darrisaw. Like I said, how I think people are going to trade up with Miami. I think teams are going to trade above the Washington football team here to try to grab Christian Darrisaw. Possibly the Bears or Steelers or any other team really could use him as a starting left tackle. I do think he will go to the Washington football team, as I don't expect the Dolphins to actually trade down, even though Dolphins, from what we know, they love to trade down. I just don't see it happening in this spot right here. But I do think Christian Darrisaw will land with the Washington football team, which is a good spot for him to go. 20th overall, Bears go with Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle of Oklahoma. Now, think about him. A lot of people do argue he is the 3rd best offensive tackle. I don't see it. People do argue that, but obviously, you never know. It's all a toss-up, and Christian Darrisaw, I do think is 3rd, but Tevin Jenkins, I can see why people would also argue that he is there. Bears would have Tevin Jenkins starting somewhere on the offensive line, hopefully left tackle, but really anywhere else, he would be totally fine. And they need offensive line help for whoever is going to be their starting quarterback, whether that's Nick Foles or Andy Dalton. It doesn't matter who's going to be their starting quarterback. They need a better offensive line than they had last year. We really saw a big decline from the Bears' offensive line over the last few years. Colts are on the clock with the 21st overall pick, and this is where they go positional value and big need here, and that is cornerback. They go Greg Newsome, cornerback from Northwestern. This is a valuable pick because obviously it's the corner position. Now, Colts, they don't really need a starting corner this upcoming season, but they need to draft a corner because you have no idea what's going to happen with Xavier Rhodes. He is injury prone. He's under contract for 1 more year. You don't know what's going to happen with him. Kenny Moore, obviously their starting corner right there. Getting someone else having depth at the corner position is vital in the NFL, and this could be huge for the Colts team. This is a good spot for him to go. He won't be a day one starter, obviously, but he will likely be transitioned into that role, as I think Xavier Rhodes just has 1 more year left in him. And now the Titans are on the clock, and this might be my favorite pick. Titans go with Elijah Moore, wide receiver of Ole Miss. Now, Titans, it's no brainer. They have to go wide receiver here, or anywhere. I mean, they need to give Tannehill more help. Outside of Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown, they just lost Jonnu Smith. They lost Corey Davis. They need someone. And who better than Elijah Moore, who was A.J. Brown's teammate in college? They only played 1 year in 2018, but once again, you can reunite them, have that as your wide receiver 1 and 2, and then obviously Derrick Henry still running the rock through every team. And that's a pretty good offense right there. I mean, when you have Derrick Henry, you don't need a very deep wide receiver core, but it's useful. They definitely need another wide receiver. It is the biggest need for them right now, and this 22nd overall is a good spot. Even if they don't get Elijah Moore, they can grab Rashad Bateman. They can grab Terrence Marshall. They have a lot of options here. So now the Jets are on the clock with the 23rd overall pick. This was from Seattle, and the Jets go with defensive end Jalen Phillips, defensive end from Miami. And this is a big need for them. They just need players all over defense and offense. Now, they did fill some offensive needs this free agency, but once again, if he's available at 23, you just go with defensive end here because he will be a very good pass rusher and could add a lot of value to their team. And now the Steelers are on the clock. Steelers are going to go with a valuable position here, and that is offensive tackle, where they take Walker Little. A lot of people argue is actually the best offensive tackle. I mean, not the best, the third best offensive tackle in this draft class over Darisaw and over Tevin Jenkins. Like I said, I don't really see that. Now, he is injury prone, very athletic, so if he stays healthy and he can develop into that role, he could be a starting left tackle. Maybe not this upcoming season, possibly, but he could be somewhere in the future. And Ben definitely needs that, as Ben is going to be aging into his 40s now, and he will need all the offensive line he can get, as he gets injured pretty easily now. So now the Jaguars on the clock with 25th overall pick, and this is where we see Jaguars take Trevon Moehrig, safety of TCU. Yes, a bit of an overdraft. Now, obviously, it's a safety, so you don't typically see safeties go in the first round. An elite safety, though, Urban Meyer, you just have to hit on those first round draft picks. Urban Meyer has 2 first-round draft picks. This is his first year as a head coach. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, lock at the first overall pick. 25th, you have to go with the safest pick because it is your first year of head coaching and you want to lock down your job. And the safest pick here is going with safety Trevon Moehrig. Everyone knows he's going to work in the NFL. And yes, it's a little bit of an overdraft because he is a safety, but once again, you just have to go with that here. And then Browns are on the clock, and I think they actually go corner with Asante Samuel Jr. Now, he won't be a day one starter, obviously. Denzel Ward and they have Hill. Those are their starting 2 corners right there. So they don't necessarily need a corner, but what they do need is depth at the corner position, and they will use him. He will play inside the slot. He will play on the outside. You can rotate him in, and then when you suffer with injuries again or COVID like they did last year, you can rotate him in, and he can be a very good starter for your team. Ravens on the clock. Ravens do need a wide receiver, and who better than to go with Rashad Bateman, my guy, wide receiver of Minnesota. Very good for Lamar Jackson. This is the best offensive scheme for him to go to. Lamar Jackson, Marquis Brown had a very bad season last year. If you remember Lamar Jackson, his yards per reception, it was very low. That's not because he was playing that bad. That's because every single deep pass that he threw to Marquis Brown, it just didn't work out. Marquis Brown had the worst season a far worse season than I was expecting. Adding Rashad Bateman, and he could be your possible wide receiver 1 coming right out of college because he's an elite route runner, an elite pass catcher. He could be very good, and going into this offense where he can be used as a deep outside wide receiver, you can play him outside the slot. You can use Rashad Bateman for a lot of things, and Lamar Jackson, there is no guy that he should be wanting to throw to better than Rashad Bateman in this draft class right now, who you can get at the 27th overall pick, And then now the Saints are on the clock with the 28th overall pick, and they go with Rondale Moore, wide receiver of LSU. They're, once again, like the Ravens, they're just sitting here waiting for a wide receiver, another very deep wide receiver class where you can get very elite wide receivers like Rashad Bateman and Rondale Moore late into the 20s, and this is a good spot for him to go. Now, obviously, the Saints did lose Emmanuel Sanders. He was under contract for 1 year. They lost Jared Cook, both those players due to free agency, and they also lost Drew Brees. So their offense took a big hit this free agency. Now, you need someone else to obviously throw to other than Michael Thomas, who didn't have a great season last year. A lot of it was due to injuries, but you can get that new wide receiver that you just have to add to your offense, and this is a good spot for him to go to. You can throw Traquan Smith inside the slot too, because he he showed up from the slot last year. I don't think he'd be a very good wide receiver alongside Michael Thomas, as Rondale Moore would just be better, but you can use him inside the slot. Packers are on the clock. Now, I don't like the Packers, but I love this draft pick. This is a very good draft pick. Taking Nick Bolton, linebacker of Mizzou, would be huge for this team. They run a 3-4 defense, and obviously have Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith on the outside, who are their core pass rushers right there. They need help at the inside linebacker position. Last year, if you watch my Dalvin Cook's tape, it was all big runs against the Packers, because you put him one-on-one against your linebackers, 1-on-2 against your inside linebackers like they did against the Packers. He just breaks loose. 26, 48, 70-yard touchdown. I mean, you need those inside linebackers, and this is what the Packers have to target. Yes, wide receiver is their biggest need, but they need a lock. They need to stop this Minnesota Vikings and Dalvin Cook next year, and that's what they need to focus on. And this is a very good spot for them to take Nick Bolton and have an elite linebacker group. Yes, you can get linebackers later in the draft, but this is a lock. This is, he's going to work. He can be your middle linebacker, or play inside linebacker along with someone else. And then you can have a very good linebacker group. And we saw how important having an elite linebacker group. Yes, an average linebacker group does the job, but having an elite group can get you that extra level. And we saw this with the Buccaneers, who won the Super Bowl last year. And this is why this is a very valuable pick at this position. And I would love to see, I wouldn't love to see that happen, but for Nick Bolton's sake, I would like to see that happen. And then now the Bills are on the clock with the 30th overall pick, and they go with Ojulari. They need pass rushers. He is the best pass rusher available. Just take him at this pick. Yes, people will argue that Russo is the best pass rusher that you can get here. I'm going to say it right now. Gregory Russo, and I will put money on it, is not going to be drafted in the first round. Yes, he had all the sacks in the world 2 years ago. He opted out last year. 2 years ago, he had 15.5 sacks. That's very impressive. Watch his tape. If you just look at stats and you grab your players based off of that, then yes, he's going to go top 15 in this. But you have to go through a lot of tape. I can put money on it. Gregory Russo will not be drafted in the first round. If he is drafted in the first round, it will be right here at the 30th overall pick to the Buffalo Bills, where they feel like he's better than Ojulari. But this is where I do think Ojulari will fall to. Chiefs are now on the clock with the 31st overall pick, who desperately need offensive line. I mean, yes, they grabbed Joe Thuney. Outside of that, they lost Eric Fisher, and I'm missing someone else who starts with a K. They did lose a bunch of players, and their offensive line was not very good in the first place. So this is where they go with someone who people also argue is the best offensive tackle or not the best, sorry, the third best offensive tackle. I keep saying the best, but that's because there's it's Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, and then there's a bunch of group of guys that you can argue for the third best. And people say it is him, and for that reason, I have him going in the first round and to the Kansas City Chiefs, which is a very good spot for him to go to, obviously, because it's the Chiefs. 32nd overall, Buccaneers on the clock. What do the Buccaneers need? Absolutely nothing. They can go interior offensive line here. They could go with Elijah Vera Tucker here. They could go with the center, Dickerson, whatever, the center guy. Thing is, it's not worth it. You can get trade offers here, and teams will trade up, and it's going to be worth it for the trade offer. Who has a desperate need right now? The Green Bay Packers. I have the Green Bay Packers trading up an entire round to get to this spot for a wide receiver. They trade their second-round draft pick, their 2022 first-round draft pick, for Terrence Marshall, wide receiver of LSU, the third wide receiver drafted in this class. You can't find a player like that in the second round, and the Green Bay Packers need to focus on wide receiver in the second round. You're not going to be getting a player like that. You need someone who's going to be an elite wide receiver alongside Devontae Adams, not only because it is Devontae Adams, because he's injury prone, and you need someone who can step into the wide receiver one role if Devontae Adams does get injured. But you don't want to see MVS come back and drop a bunch of passes. You don't want to see Allen Robinson. Sorry, you don't want to rely on MVS coming into your starting role. You don't want to rely on Allen Robinson looking as good as he did about 2 games of last year. You don't want to rely on your whole season on that. And it's no question Aaron Rodgers needs another target, and Terrence Marshall can bring that to the table. And for that reason, if the Packers give up their second-round draft pick and their 2022 first-round draft pick, this will be good for them because they're taking a gamble on their next season. Packers were a championship game away from making the Super Bowl. What held them back? An inside linebacker and a wide receiver. That is what held the Packers season back, and that's why they didn't make the Super Bowl. If they had those two positions filled, they were better at stopping the run, and they had another weapon they could use on offense because, like we see you double team Devontae Adams or even throw Jalen Ramsey on Devontae Adams, it gets hard. It's hard for Aaron Rodgers to make a play out of that. So for that reason, it's a clear need that they need wide receiver and they need inside linebacker. They can fill both of those roles in the first round. They can't fill those roles in the first and the second round combined. For that reason, I think them trading up is both good for the Packers and then both good for the Buccaneers, because the Buccaneers would get another second round draft pick and then a 2022 first round draft pick where they can kind of decide what their needs are in 1 year, because they have no needs right now. And that first round draft pick could be a 32nd overall if the Packers win the Super Bowl. Even if it's a 32nd overall, it's worth it because the Buccaneers have no need right here. They can go with Landon Dickerson or Elijah Vera Tucker, some interior offensive lineman for Tom Brady. But in reality, grabbing a first-round draft pick in next year's draft would just mean more, as you'd know what your needs really are. So that's it. 5 quarterbacks, 6 offensive linemen, 7 wide receivers, 5 defensive linemen, 5 corners, 1 tight end, 2 linebackers, 1 safety. All drafted in the first round. And I think if I were to say my favorite pick, it would have to be the Carolina Panthers going with Penei Sewell at 8 because he's an elite offensive tackle, and he can very easily go to the Bengals at 5. Thing is, the Bengals can get an offensive tackle in the second round, and one of these offensive tackles I named that were going in the 20s could possibly fall into the second round, where the Bengals would also be able to get them. So that wraps up my mock draft, my 2021 NFL mock draft, morning kickoff edition. 32 teams. 32 players drafted. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, be sure to rate and subscribe or I guess this is YouTube, so subscribe and like, because it took a long time making this and it was a process, and I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, be sure to rate and not rate and subscribe. You can rate if you're listening on Spotify, which yes, this podcast is also on Spotify if you did not know. We also have a merch store if you'd like to check it out, but I really appreciate you all tuning into this episode of Morning Kickoff. Have a great day.